This Sounds Better, an audio engineering podcast for everyone.
Welcome back to the This Sounds Better podcast with Miles Walker, Jason Kingsland, and myself, Alex Tumay. Today we're going to be talking about something that is important to all of us. Does gear matter? Does it?
Hang on. Are we going to talk about the new Mac Pro in this episode?
I think we need to.
Oh, man. Can this be a sponsored episode?
Yeah.
Can we get some of that Apple bread?
Well, I don't think it'll be sponsored after Jason talks, but you know.
Yeah, exactly. F-bomb this. Oh, damn it, Jason. There goes our sponsorship.
Like, fuck a $35,000 computer.
Yeah, no.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about that $35,000 computer.
So, what in the fucking world, guys? It's the biggest deal on the planet right now is the new Mac Pro.
Well, I mean, is it? Because who can afford it? Like, who's taking out the student loans to get a MacBook or a Mac Pro in 2020?
Well, I agree. $35,000 for a computer is full stop insane for literally any level of professional if you're not sponsored somewhere.
Yeah.
But one of the things that is interesting about it is a modular computer, and that's kind of a new thing for Mac. It's usually been an all-in-one sale.
Bullshit.
So what I got to say is I like the fact that you can tier it up and down. Granted, your base tier is still 6 racks, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But if you look at the customers that currently are still using the cheese grater Mac, one of the greatest Mac Pros of all time, they haven't had to do anything about peripherals yet, like a Thunderbolt expansion chassis to be able to use any kind of Thunderbolt interface or whatever it is. So they haven't spent that kind of money. So going back to the PCI architecture, having the ability to put their cards in their system, that saves them an extra $1,000 of something they would have bought. All right. Does that get the price point down to something that's reasonable? Absolutely not. The computer is still very expensive. But what I am saying is, depending on when the last time you bought a computer was, there might be some advantages to this Mac Pro that you're really taking it, like, that's working for your own personal system. I've bought those expansion chassis, so I'm out $1,000 on each one of those for having to use that already. I've been on the iMac architecture for a while. I really like those computers, but I can also see that there's definitely some people that are getting an advantage of this for their system.
I have 2 words for you, Miles. Stockholm Syndrome. Fuck right the fuck off with that. They made a brilliant platform that was a totally modular platform. It's the cheese grater Mac. They were there. They had all of this tech already. And now, years later, after having a wildly unsuccessful product.
Like, oh, no doubt. The trash can,
the fucking trash
rip.
Can.
Yeah, rip.
The solution they're going to proffer for long-waiting professionals who have been the cornerstone of Apple's business is going to be a computer that, in order to receive double to triple the performance of their now 6 to 10-year-old product line, is going to be the cost of a low-level Audi. You got to be fucking kidding me. It's insane. Makes no sense. There's no working professional that's ever going to go for this as a pro line. It's completely a slap in the face from Apple.
There goes our sponsorship.
I don't. The views of the podcast are not the views of Alex Tumay. I have my own views. I love all Macs. Please give me a Macintosh computer. Thank you very much.
We apologize for Jason's rampant F-bombs. Apple, holler at your boy. Drop us that new tower.
I will say this. I've been in the market for a personal computer, non-laptop situation since ever. You know what I mean? And I haven't ever bit the bullet and bought one because my laptop has been substantial enough to get the mixes done. But as the technology and the load from my sessions gets more intensive, I've been looking in the market of Hackintosh, the iMac Pro, even the trash can, and now the Mac Pro is here, which people have been talking about. Like, when I went to the Apple store to look at the iMac, they were like, just wait. They told me at the store that it's coming. Just wait and it'll be what you want. But they didn't say the price point when they said that.
Yeah, right. And it'll be what you want to mortgage your new house with.
And so I'm at the point where, do I bite the bullet and spend the 10 grand or whatever it is and have a computer that's future proof, air quotes, or do I get the Hackintosh and maybe get 2 of them you know, or do I get 2 iMacs or what? Like, what's the solution for someone like me, I guess? Cause I know a lot of people listening are going to have that, and you guys are smarter than all of us.
Well, here's my advantage on it, and why I think I have so much qualm with this product is when the iMac Pro came out and they had put out, like, I think it was the 18-core system, and it was like, what, $7,500, right, Miles?
About that, yeah.
It's somewhere in that, like, 7-8 range, right?
Yeah.
It's up there.
And I think everyone was like, Jesus, this is ridiculous. Who would ever spend $7,000 to $8,000 on a computer? And, like, I still feel that way. You know, I can kind of see it. It's got the screen with it, but then you still have to buy the chassis for it. So for, like, if you want to be a card-based Pro Tools user, you're in $10K on this rig.
Sure.
Which to me comes to a point where that is definitively a losing asset. You are going to lose all 10,000 of those dollars at some point in your life. While I can understand that it's maybe one of the most important things that I will own as a part of my system, it's still just a tool. This is not some bespoke fucking abacus for me to make modern day computer music on. It's a tool I need to turn on, I need to work reliably, and it needs to be priced in a way that makes sense for a modern day working professional in any field. And frankly, Avid doesn't really keep up with Mac OS updates. So you know you're going to buy the system, and you know you're going to have to spend forever trying to figure out how to uninstall whatever the new fucking Mac OS is, and then get back to the version that works with Pro Tools. And like, why?
I saw something from Avid today where they were like, the new Mac Pro, like, it's going to be great. I was like, when am I going to be able to use it? Like, what are you talking about? Why would you ever post that? Like, why would you ever post that as Avid? You're 4 years behind at best.
I think that Avid was so excited that they brought back of the PCI architecture. They were like, holy shit, we can sell you these HDX cards that no one is buying. Yay! I think that's where that ad specifically from Avid comes from.
I feel that. I was just so, like, blown away because I'm like, as much as I love Pro Tools, like, I would really like to, like, I can't even buy the new iMac yet because I need it to work with Mojave. Like,
just to be fully accurate, 19.5 dropped, at the top of last month, and it is Mojave compatible, and it is, by all accounts, running pretty well. Am I running Mojave? No, I'm not insane. Of course, I'm a few back. But, and that's something you'll always run into with one of the new computers is you're pretty much flash frozen into the most recent OS, which can create some problems for people on the third party system. It's like, yeah, it's great. This new computer so fast, but if all the software I want to run on it isn't ready, then what's the point of having paid that much money for a computer?
What OS are you on, actually? I'm kind of curious.
Sierra's been really, really solid for me, and I haven't had any reason to go past it. It's new enough to where it's like modern, but it's not bleeding edge to where I'm waiting on a driver or I'm waiting on a plugin to update so it doesn't freak out or whatever it is. That's been good for me.
You know, I feel like most working engineers I know are at least 2 OS versions behind modern Apple is.
That's right.
Let me ask this, because this is something I'm not there yet, but I see it in the mail. At what point would you be willing, like, where is your breakaway point with Apple? Do you have one? Do you have a point where you'd say, fuck this?
I don't. I'm built into the architecture so much that it would require a top-down repurchase from everything else. But the reason I'm also less bummed out about the fact that I'm broken into there is whenever, and this is one of the reasons why you mentioned Hackintosh, it's one of the reasons why I stay away from that. If you start going third party, you don't have anybody to talk to if your system doesn't work. If you're running a Hackintosh, every single manufacturer is like, oh, fuck you. I don't have to help you because that's not a supported system. And that's a tough pill to swallow when you're going through some real tech issues and you want to make sure everything works.
I think as someone who hasn't had the Hackintosh and has been on a system that they've been familiar with, and I think a lot of people feel the same way I do, there's an innate fear that, like, shit, everything goes wrong, and now what do I do? And I think that at least a little bit owning a Mac, like, lessens that kind of fear. And that's what's kept me from going full Hackintosh, because I'm on the border. I've gotten a lot, from you and from a few other engineers that are just like, I haven't had to touch it. Like, I installed everything, got it up and running, like, troubleshot whatever I had to troubleshoot, and it was done. And then they haven't, it's been like 4 or 5 years and they're like, it's fine. It runs everything. It never crashes, whatever. But like, that's a risk, you know?
I agree that, you know, some manufacturers are better than other. And to your point, Jason, about like how many times have I reached out and got support that was worth a damn? Plenty on a lot of third party stuff. You know, like I will say that like Selmany has some of the best tech support I've ever heard in my life doing the Melodyne stuff. UA has been really strong too, and they're very forward and vocal about, hey guys, don't jump up to the new S. We're not there yet. You know, some companies are really good about it, and some companies go down in flames. You're totally right that it's like across the board varied, and like I don't want to poke fun at any, but there's some big manufacturers that have pretty poorly known DAW support. Let's just leave it at that. And, you know, that can create a lot of problems. So anytime you can alleviate one of the problems from those manufacturers and be like, I'm using a certified computer, you owe me support because I paid you my money. Or in the case of said manufacturer, you're paying a monthly subscription service for the same software. You have a solid gripe on your side. But I know these are all things that just kind of go into like decisions you need to make for yourself when you're building your gear and figuring out, is my time, my downtime, my supported tech time, are these worth the money trade-offs that I'm going to do when I'm putting my system together?
$35K.
I mean, no one is talking about that model.
Yeah,
I think that one is laughable
yeah.
on all accounts.
I didn't see the conference, you know? I didn't watch it because I was busy, but did they say 35,000? Like where, like.
That's an estimate.
Okay.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I was going to say, because that would be such a crazy thing to put in your like presentation to be like, oh, and by the way, behind me, yeah, that's how much it costs.
It's a blown out Honda Civic.
Yeah.
You know, like.
That's the bottom of the line Audi. Like,
hey, they put some wheels on it, so maybe you can ride that bitch down the street now. You know, like
that'd be
at
sick
least.
if it was like the luggage with like the motor where you could sit on your luggage and
in the airport, just driving your Mac Pro around. See, look, you're not thinking about all the applications, Jason. 35 is a great value
for a car and a computer.
And here's, I think, the one quick follow up on this that I want to chuck out there. Like, I by no means am promoting Hackintoshes, and I think it's a foolhardy platform to kind of start looking into, in that Apple has kind of all but stated that they're going to be moving away from the Intel platform, which means that their Hackintosh ain't worth shit here in a couple of years.
That's definitely true.
And my thing is that there is this very awkward point where they kind of want to have a closed architecture system, but then like it's increasingly friendly, which like blocks out pro users even on the software side of being able to like configure your system in ways that you actually want to do just on the OS level. That like there's a large part of me that like for the first time in like 15 years, I kind of thought about Windows, guys.
I mean, if you want to roll the dice, to me, that's less about the decision on your computer and more about the decision on all your third party. Do they even develop the software on PC? I know they port it over, but do they develop it on PC?
Yeah.
I can't switch to Windows. Like the quick key reprogramming of my brain.
Oh,
where
yeah.
controller
You just
command,
melt down on the keyboard level.
Controller and command are not in the same spot. I've tried to use a Windows computer and it fries my fucking brain. It's just not
It is terrible.
possible.
I've done one session on Pro Tools on Windows, and
it's awful.
I hated it.
It's awful.
It's so bad.
Well, I love that, you know, we were going to start talking about gear today, but really we've just talked about computers, specifically the new Mac Pro, for a good 15 minutes.
Well, let's just say that gear matters when it comes to computers because, I mean, and it's mostly about price point and functionality when it comes to computers because, like, that's what we're talking about here.
Well, you're halfway right. I do agree that it is price point and like using your budget to things that really matter in your system. But the other thing that these really matter is time. As these computers get faster and faster, have more processing, it's allowing you to do certain processes offline faster. So now you're like, oh man, stems used to take me an hour and a half. Now stems take me 15 minutes. You just got 45 minutes back in your day every single day. Let's extrapolate that across a work week. All of a sudden, you might be able to fit in 2 extra mixes. So I can see that, you know, even though we're talking about a lot of money, saving time becomes very valuable too.
And I agree with that. And I think that the one area where you really notice it is going to be on the tracking front, actually. So on a mix, if it fucks up and it costs you 45 minutes, like, that's terrible, and no one wants to lose 45 minutes. I ain't got fucking time for that. But if you lose a take, holy shit.
I mean, yeah, if you lose a take, but like, as someone who needs to freeze like a bunch of tracks every time I want to do a print, like, yes, you might lose 45 minutes, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's driving me insane. I have like 10 albums of stems to do right now, and they're taking me so long. And I don't have an assistant, and I only have my laptop, and I'm definitely not handing my laptop to an assistant. I need to figure this out. So like, this podcast is really just for you guys to help me make my decision right now.
But basically the pitch for and against the new Mac Pro, my stance versus Jason's stance.
Yeah.
But, you do bring up something that is really important when we talk about this time. That level of time, not only just talking about saving it, you're also talking about it takes you out of the mode creatively.
Yeah.
Because you have a crash. And even though it's mixing, you're like, it's not losing a take. Like, I completely agree with Jason. That could be catastrophic to the right artist on the wrong day type thing. But, to even a solo sport like mixing, where you're totally thrown out of the creative process because you have to do all these technical steps because the rig can't hang. So I can definitely see that there becomes other reasons other than just the price and the time. Even the creativity all goes together.
Well, and that said, even within all of this stuff, right, is that we have certain things that we want to do. Just because you want to do it doesn't mean you have to do it. Like, I use some very CPU intensive plugins. And Miles, I know you use a ton of UAD and own tons of cards.
Very true. Very true.
Well, but you don't have to do that.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You can tailor your process to work with the computer you have. And that's a very good point. But, in that diminishing return standpoint, what are you trading off that you're not getting in order to be able to work that way?
Well, and I think limitations are good in general, especially when you're starting out. It's good to limit yourself. And me and Jason were talking about this the other day when we were bringing up this topic, and I was like, you are not your gear. When I first started, I always thought that I was missing something. Like, I would buy an interface, I would buy speakers, and I would be in my room, and I'd have Pro Tools set up, and I would have all the plugins all the crack plugins. I'd be sitting there trying to mix something without any experience, just like straight out of school. And I was like, there's something missing here that isn't me. It's not my fault that these mixes aren't good. I'm clearly missing gear. And then I started interning at a studio with all the gear, and I was like, see, told you. You know what I mean? And I had all this gear, and I was like watching Ben work and watching Jason work, and I was like, this is what I was missing this whole time. It's not me. It's the fact that Jason and Ben have every piece of gear ever. And then I got to DARP, and there was a computer, and that was it. And that's when I started to get good. It's because I only had one mic chain and a computer, and that's what made me start to have to learn.
So do you think when you were in the other studios where you had all the gear, was it the visual imagery? And sometimes, people see that in ads and they got the racks of gear behind them. They're like, that's why that guy's good. He's got all the toys. So do you think even visually you were intimidated? Even before you knew what was used, what wasn't, it was just being surrounded by it. You felt like you were crutched.
I wouldn't say crutched or intimidated, but I would say that I felt like vindicated in my failures before I started interning. You know what I mean?
I see. Okay.
And I attributed other people's success to their gear and everything they had, like the console, all the boutique gear, the full HDX system. I was like, oh, I don't have HDX. That interface is making his mix sound better. Or this gear is making like these recordings sound way better than I can get. And then I went down and I only had, it was a good vocal chain, but it was just into a Mac Pro with some janky mains and some NS10s, and I had to make it work, and only crack plugins.
Well, and I think that one thing that's very important, I will say this about gear, is that it is an opportunity to learn no matter what you're on, right? Like, for instance, I have been in a multitude of situations where I've got some new fancy boutique piece of gear, like $10,000 compressor, that I've learned tons about how I want something to sound. Now, I'll hear a sound from that piece of equipment, or I'll hear it from some way, and that'll teach me to have like, oh, there's a new goalpost I can shoot for, and I can find new ways of making that same sound. But like, you kind of have to hear it in person once or twice to be like, oh yeah, I know how to get there again. Like, I've heard it. I know that it's got these ballistics in this contour, etc.
So with your experience working with a lot of kind of unique boutique pieces. Maybe they're even custom and you get the experience to work with them. After you get that sound and it's like ingrained in your head and you know you can go to that piece and get it, do you start working on a backup plan? With the way people are working these days, constantly changing and maybe like revisiting old songs with new parts, you might not be able to get back into that studio, or that piece of gear is gone. It's only there for a week. Do you think about plug-in laterals that you're like, I know this new sound, this plug-in might get me half of the way there and then I got to tweak it? How do you future-proof your gear process when you're putting together a sound in recording, like for front end with mic pre's and mics, and also with mixing, maybe like a compression or something that's like a bus sound? How do you plan ahead for that?
I don't.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There's no answer.
I do not. But the short of it is this, is that for me, at least, once you hear something, you can maybe not get exactly back there, but so I might not be able to get to like Manhattan, but I can get to Brooklyn. And that's sometimes pretty fucking close.
And I think that's more telling of your experience than it is of the gear. You know what I mean? It's the fact that you've used it all.
I think that's the point.
Yeah. And I guess when it comes to gear for me, when it comes to, does it matter? Is it important? Like, does it make a difference? Can you be good without it? You know what I mean? And I think the answer is overwhelmingly yes, you can make an amazing mix in the box, especially in 2019. Like, you can get to the point, like to the promised land of a finished mix inside of a laptop with nothing but crack plugins.
Shout out crack plugins, apparently. But
I mean, just one thing. The reason I'm saying crack plugins is because I understand that people starting do not have the budget.
Sure, yeah.
Once you have the budget, I fully recommend spending the money. But when you don't, I don't recommend just, sitting there with nothing. Go steal some plugins. Do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty safe stance on crack plugins. If you make money from your process, you need to use paid software.
Yeah,
I'm going with that. But if you want to learn how to use a plugin and really determine if it's worth it for you, there are alternatives in the universe, and I think they're demos. I think that's what they're basically called. But anyway, it's funny that you mentioned about great records being done in the box now. Now, as I've always been a big fan of gear and people's processes, the one that's been like confidence inspiring for me is a mixer that is known to be all analog, out the box, Gear City, and then he makes the transition to in the box and you don't notice. That is the ultimate like stamp of gear. Doesn't matter. It's the process and it's your ears and it's how you do it. Shout out Spike's Thin. I remember when I found out this dude had transitioned from the desk to the box, blew my mind. And I thought for sure, I was like, oh yeah, here's the one. Maybe it's from here on, right? And his assistant was like, nope, it was way earlier than that. And I was like, oh, damn, dude, I got smoked on that one.
Shout out Matty Green.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly who it was. Big ups, Matty Green. That's the homie right there. And yeah, he blew my mind on that one.
I mean, like, I agree that like none of this shit really matters. And I think that the overwhelming point is that like you've got to be able to listen to stuff and you've got to be able to know what your direction is. And having new experiences and having access to new sounds and hearing new things will help you come up with new ways of being able to listen and find routes to stuff that sounds good to you. But there is by no means a prescriptive way in doing that. I mean, the amount of times I've sat in the studio, and I'm sure that, like, I think, Alex, we were talking last night and you're saying, I'm not crazy about 1176s, right?
Yep.
Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, I did say that.
Oh my God. Blaspheme.
I know.
Fuck you.
I know. But it's also
human.
it's also because I haven't had the time with them. That's what we were talking about. It's like, yes, I've used the plugin but I have plugins I prefer. But like in the real gear situation, I just haven't been in a studio with a good 1176 in a really long time.
Well, so there's 10,000 plus now, including all the clones and copies and all that bullshit. I can tell you safely, 4 of 5 times I'm going to plug into an 1176 at a studio, I will on the inside secretly wish it was the UAD Blue Stripe. Telling you.
That Rev A clone is a good one.
It's just good. And, people's gear isn't always set up or hasn't been maintained or whatever, and it sounds different.
That's right.
And I just wish it was the UAD one, and that's fine. I don't give a fuck anymore. It's just a sound.
Well, that's exactly what it is. And based on Alex's experience, it sounds like you never heard the sound of a good one. And therefore, your experience is like, I don't like them. Jason, based on your experience, you heard a lot of good ones and you're like, oh my gosh, 1176s are great. And I think that's kind of one of the big differences between gear versus plugins. It's not about which is better. It's which gives you the sound that you hear in your head. And if it's been a piece of gear and that's what you use for your process, for your sonic goal, great. If it's a plugin, also great. But that's why it's most interesting to me to see people that have transitioned between the two for the years. They've been able to cross that bridge from something they heard in analog and then they brought it back in plugin world or whatever it was. And it didn't slow down their creative process. It didn't hinder their sonics. And that's a big difference of, whether it's going to be your ears or your gear that make the difference.
Well, and for me, when it comes to vocals, especially vocal recording, it's like I've used the CL1B 400,000 times. I probably have over like 10,000 hours just using a CL1B in recording just because of the studio that I was in, and it's like, I'm used to that tool, that's
right.
That's the hammer of choice for me. You know what I mean? And if I switch to the 1176, it's just not going to be as good because I have so much time understanding how exactly the attack and the release feel on the CL1B, and I could do whatever I need to do with that. And because I've spent so much time with it, which is just it's a result of the limitations. You know what I mean?
Well, hand in hand with that, though, we enter this crazy world where the CL1B just stops existing tomorrow. Like they can't make the tubes or whatever. Could you make the 1176 happen?
Oh, 100%. And I would sit there for the required amount of time to do it. But again, I haven't had that happen. And also, I don't record vocals that much anymore, so fuck it. Like, it doesn't really matter.
I think the tube component, like, changing platforms and one being like optical and one being like FET, there's a lot of sub nerdy details, but really it's just that sound in your head. If you make it sound like you want that vocal to sound, however you get there, go for it.
I feel like so much of this comes down to understanding what you want to sound like and having a really firm instinct on that inside of yourself. And like at the end of it, I could do it with the 1073 and the CO1B and a Fairchild and get one result and be happy. I could do it with like a fucking Mackie and like an Alesis 336 and be okay.
Behringer headphone mixer. God bless you.
Yes.
So we've talked a lot about why gear doesn't matter, and for some reason, the Mac Pro, but we haven't talked a lot about why gear does matter, which I think we're going to end up picking up on the next episode of the This Sounds Better podcast. We've been Miles Walker, Jason Kingsland, and myself, Alex Tumay. Put that in there. That's the end of the episode. That was so good. Yeah, I think that's good. And that's the episode, everybody. Thanks for watching. This sounds better.